Okay, it's linking up. Okay, guys, we are live. Let's go.
Okay, so hi everyone. Today we'll be discussing the importance of social media and the expression of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. So, starting off, the way that we will structure this discussion is through 7 different questions. So the first question will be, is there such thing as too much freedom? We'll be talking about people such as Piers Morgan, Katie Hopkins, people that have had their freedom of speech and expression violated. Should they be allowed to have their platforms? We will also be discussing if we think, that do we have too much freedom, and what happens when freedom online is taken away from us? Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Also, is social media the best place to share your controversial opinion? And or do we need fact checking on social media? And should we also have limits to freedom of speech on social media? So these are the different types of topics we will be covering today. And first of all, we are just going to briefly define what freedom of speech is, so we all know, so we can all define what this means. So freedom of speech is the right to seek, receive, and impart freedom and ideas of all kinds by any means. Freedom of speech and the right to freedom of expression applies to ideas of all kinds, including those that might be offensive. But this comes with responsibilities and roles, and we believe that this can be restricted. So we are going to be talking about what happens online when your freedom of speech is violated, experiences of the people whose freedom of speech and expression has been violated, roles and responsibilities we have online as a member of an online community, and how to navigate the social space. So we're going to kickstart this discussion with Tia. So she will be discussing what happens. She will be discussing idea of too much freedom, and should people be allowed to share their controversial opinions on these platforms. So take it away, Tia.
Okay, so leading on to what Hannah said about freedom. So freedom of speech and the press have long been recognised as vital cornerstones of free and democratic government. So nevertheless, it has long been recognised that these freedoms cannot be unlimited. And that therefore means that freedom of speech is generally looked at something that is negative in the public eye. So a journalist once said that he loves to speak and he also loves justice and justification. And he quoted that free thought from those who agree with us, but freedom for thought that hate. However, anybody can have speech, and if you don't like what someone's got to say, it can't always be protected, but the government should protect people's speech, and also if someone finds something offensive. And from that point, if we look at Piers Morgan, we all know that he walked off of ITV due to like the weatherman saying something, and Piers Morgan obviously used a lot of powerful words. To him, it didn't seem like anything harsh, but to the public eye and to the royal family, it was very harsh. So what are your thoughts on that? Was what Piers Morgan did correct? Was it good? Was it bad? Like, what are your thoughts?
In my opinion, I feel like due to the current climate we live in today, such as, especially online and especially Twitter, for example, people are quite politically woke. So there is a cancel culture. There is a consequence that occurs with sharing a controversial opinion. For example, like Piers Morgan, as a result, he lost his job. There was a lot of hate comments online. He had to issue an apology, but he refused because he's standing on the grounds of freedom of speech. You know, he actually said that that's a hill I'm willing to die on, you know, and he's had many experiences during the past where he's worked for a newspaper, and he said comments and, you know, issued an article, and he's actually been, you know, sacked as a result. So he is definitely a person that is willing to go all the way for freedom of speech. But what he doesn't understand is the current climate. There are consequences to those actions. So like accounts will be suspended. For example, Katie Hopkins is no longer on Twitter. I think she's recently come back, or she was suspended for a long time. So was Wiley for what he said about his anti-Semitic comments. People out there don't want to hear controversial opinions, and if they do, I feel as if your opinion will be brought down with a ton of bricks but the comment he actually made, in my opinion, was justified for him to be cancelled, because he actually said that he didn't believe Meghan Markle had mental health issues, which is an outrageous statement by any claim, because how can you say that about a person who's, you know, she admitted she was feeling suicidal and depressed. And so in my opinion, I feel like those actions and consequences that he faced are justifiable. That's what I think. What do you guys think? Jess, Leanne?
I think that freedom of speech is something that everyone's entitled to, but I think when it hurts other people's feelings, or if it belittles or kind of devalues how they feel, then it's kind of out of order. The mental health comment especially, that for me goes over the line of freedom of speech, because you're not entitled enough to say that someone isn't feeling the way that they feel. You can't tell someone how to feel. So I feel like freedom of speech is a good thing when people use it to voice their opinions in a case where it doesn't affect others negatively. But I think Piers Morgan just steps over the line sometimes and uses that as an excuse rather than like the right to voice the positive things, I guess. Yeah.
But this is the whole argument, isn't it? So freedom of speech, we all support freedom of speech, but who gets to choose who doesn't have it and who does have it? And how do you police that? This is all, I mean, we're going to discuss this for the whole hour, but I just wanted to throw that out there. So
Hannah, just 1 second. So, you know, leading from what Leanne said. So, you know, from like, since that, there's actually like a human right, which is the Human Rights Act of 1998. And that's everybody has the right to freedom, and that's freedom for speech and expression. But obviously there are limitations to that. So in that, the law states that for freedom, it could be subjected for like formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties that are given by law. So although, yes, we all know, like Piers Morgan said some horrible things and crossed the line, absolutely agree. However, there is no actual law to define is what he said correct or is what he said wrong, because really and truly anyone could make these statements. That's the only thing. So I think with freedom of speech, we obviously need to know where to draw the line, because anyone can be affected. And just because it might not affect him in a way, it's going to obviously affect the person he's directed it at and to their family and friends and to other people in the community.
What you also have to understand is part of your question, Tia, I think is there such a thing as too much freedom? And Katie Hopkins, for example, and Piers Morgan are both, you know, we have to understand their backgrounds. They are well-educated, white, middle to, you know, upper class people. And they're reporters. So they have already access to a lot of freedom which supports their outrageous claims that they make online.
Yeah.
So, for example, if a person of colour was saying what they were saying, I don't think it would have been as tolerated for as long. But for example, I think Wiley was another example. He said anti-Semitic comments, and he was completely like taken down of YouTube, completely taken down of Twitter, Instagram, multiple. I think Nella Rose as well. You had.
Yes, so looking at the two different comparisons from like Wiley to Nella Rose, who is somebody who's actually, she's from London, but she studied in Leicester, I believe. in Leicester, she started her journey for YouTube, and the fact that there's a lot of like remarks and stereotypical quotes of light-skinned people, where it's like light-skinned people are better than dark-skinned people, and there's a lot of comparisons like that, even with like just simple makeup brands, and hard to find what your preference is and stuff like that. And because Nella Rose she'd class herself as a dark-skinned person, but she just could not consider or find what was right for her in makeup. So what she did, she put a few it just expressed herself like any other person on social media, but it was Twitter in specifically. And one quote she said was, "Black people shouldn't be loud, and if they are loud, they shouldn't say that and they're not loud." Just a general statement like that. And another one, it was to do with race as well as makeup, and it was like, Black people from ethnic minorities should not wear makeup because they don't look good in it. And obviously she got major backlash from like about 70,000 people. She obviously lost a lot of influencers and stuff like that. And the thing is, once you're so high in the whole social media and influencer background, you can also get so caught up in it. And at the end of the day, you have to be careful with what you say, because you don't know who it's going to be hurting. Like, and we've obviously like seen that from her to Piers Morgan. It could be anybody.
Definitely. Dipesh, do you have any thoughts?
I think there should be some sort of sensitivity when you're talking about these kind of things, because there is freedom of speech, but you kind of need to consider what people think about the person you're talking about after you've said stuff. And so sort of the comments that Piers Morgan, for example, has been making, they're not really the best things to say live on air, where thousands of people could be listening as well, because it could hurt, it could hurt Meghan Markle and her reputation as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next question. Tia, do you want to move on to your second question?
Yeah. So the second part of that question is, do you think our freedoms are being taken away from us? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? So that kind of obviously combines with the previous question. Personally, I find that, yes, our freedoms have been taken from like an extent. And this is just like looking at past history, like comparing it from then till now. And especially like within the last year or so, we've been in a pandemic for so long. Coronavirus has hit a lot of people hard. And we've also had a lot of like reasons to fight for certain causes, like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. So that's obviously like hit a lot of people from home. And also with that, we've been at home for so long, and like social media is literally the only outlet. And from that's going to encourage people to talk more, because that's where like the headlines kind of go. Like if you're not watching it on the news, on TV, you're going to be seeing it on social media. So yeah, in a way, it is a good thing because you're able to express your feelings and concerns. However, at the same time, you have to be cautious of what's going to come back to you, depending on what you put out there.
I'm just going to comment on that and say that in terms of freedoms being taken away from us, I feel like slowly, gradually, they eventually will be, because of how social media is set up. I feel like if you don't feel comfortable commenting on a controversial topic due to, backlash, or people, your followers or your family or your people that, keep up with you, you're scared of how they might receive things, then ultimately your freedom of speech is being violated. You have to start filtering yourself. It changes the way you act online. So in that regard, I would say that you can't 100% be yourself on social media. Therefore, your freedom of speech is limited. So it is slowly being taken away from us, in my point of view. Dipesh, do you have any thoughts on that?
I kind of agree, because you've got social media, which is such a massive platform for people to talk, and freedom of speech is taken away when people say things, and there's more and more restrictions on what people can say, and so people might not say certain things because they're afraid of being cancelled or getting taken down on these social media platforms. So yeah.
Just to share another opinion, like the other side, to disagree with that comment. So, what do you think about people, for example, that support Donald Trump or that believe in all lives matter? Do you feel like their freedom is being taken away because they don't have? There's online. There's no tolerance for those groups of people. You know, I feel like, regardless of your opinion, if you have access to freedom of speech and freedom of expression, then you should feel freely to say, feel what you want. But with social media, there's such a fine line, and you step out a line and your account becomes suspended, your tweets get reported, your profile might get taken down, your friends and family can see what's going on. So ultimately, all of this combined and rolled into one kind of like makes you feel as if like, whoa, I'm gonna just step back and just sit on the fence. It's much safer to sit on the fence about things and not comment on, for example, what's happening now with Sarah Everard. There's a lot of talk about the place of men and the role of men online, with ensuring safety with women, and walking down the street at night. How does a young woman carry herself? Does she reach for her keys in her bag, or does she go the long way home and avoid cutting through dark lit alleyways and stuff? So there's a lot of stuff going online right now about this exact topic, and there's a lot of backlash with men saying, not all men are like this, and sweeping statements can be quite detrimental. Jess, Leanne, do you guys have any input?
Jessica.
Oh, in terms of like, we're discussing like freedom, I think like freedom is quite subjective. And I feel like in terms of your like question about Donald Trump and like all lives matter, there's ways to voice opinions that are not that don't restrict people's feelings or like disrespect other people. If you don't agree with the movement, there's a certain manner in which you can say that. So I feel like it's not really freedom being taken away, but it's protecting other people and protecting other people's mental health. If you're constantly seeing things that oppose you or like affect you, it's not like you're not protected. So I feel like with freedom, it's absolutely subjective, and I feel like the betterment of people's happiness is more important than toxic ideals in a way.
Yeah, I think that freedom itself is like everyone to be free. So like the whole comment to do with Donald Trump and people saying all lives matter and things like that, it kind of contradicts it, because that might be their opinion, but that statement is then taking away freedom from other people. So I feel like censorship in a kind of way online is not necessarily a bad thing. And it's not a new thing either, that people that go against society's norms or go against the grain or something like that are seen as outcasts or seen as wrong or something. It's like, it's no different to if you want to like minimalize it in primary school. If you didn't have the cool shoes, you were the weird one, you were the odd one out, because that's what society sees you as, because you're going against what other people are doing. So I don't think it's like a new thing, but I think Jess is right in the sense that people think it's their freedom being taken away when it's actually just there to protect other people, because that's the whole point of everyone being free, that everyone feels protected and heard as well.
But do you understand how everyone cannot be protected? There's no guarantee that everyone will feel safe online, because everyone is saying what everyone wants to say. Do you see what that it's like? Catch-22. So how are you supposed to navigate that?
I don't know. I think that like online, you just have to be able to take everything with a pinch of salt, because anyone can make an account online, anyone can make a Twitter, Instagram, they can say whatever they want. But I think you just have to know within yourself what your values are, what your morals are, what you think is wrong and right, and don't impose it onto other people. I think that's when like freedom gets blurred, when people are saying, no, it's not Black Lives Matter, it's all lives matter, like, no, you're wrong. It's that type of thing when it's not. If that's what you believe, then that's your thing, but don't impose it on others and say that they're wrong, so just like everyone having their boundaries and keeping it to themselves.
100%. And I feel like as humans, we all know what is wrong and what is right, and how your comments will affect people. Like, it's Like everybody knows the good and the bad. So to say like, oh, what is offensive, like how to articulate yourself in a way that's not offensive. So I feel like in terms of that, freedom is you can be nice with freedom, basically.
Okay, perfect. We're gonna move on to my next question, which is Leanne is going to take away, which is basically, is social media the best place to share your opinion? So take it away, Leanne.
So I think that social media is really good because it lets people openly express their opinions without disagreement from friends and family and people like that. And people feel a lot more comfortable when situations aren't face to face, because you don't have that immediate backlash. You don't have someone responding to your face, like it's just over the internet. So people feel like they can say whatever they want and there's not really any repercussions. A lot of celebrities do that as well when they work for big corporations or they're influencers or something. They don't want to lose brand deals from their views, or they don't want to lose out on their job because of the way that they think doesn't agree with their company's morals. But then that kind of goes with the thing of that if you're scared to say something because you think you might lose your job, or your friends won't agree, or your family will be hurt by it, then you shouldn't necessarily go out and say that to a load of strangers, which is what's going to happen on social media because anyone can find it. I think that social media in general is probably, out of all the places, the best place to give controversial opinions where neither party is hurt or disrespected or feels like they're being belittled in any kind of way. But I've seen personally a lot of like really interesting debates and discussions and things like that on Twitter. Not necessarily massive things, but sometimes it's political, sometimes it's little stuff like, how do you like your toast? Like just random things, and being able to communicate and get different views from people around the world. It's kind of refreshing, and in some cases that helps people to develop their kind of awareness in a way. So not just having people around them saying, yeah, you're right. Having people disagreeing and saying, no, that's wrong. I don't believe that. I believe this. It can be like, oh, like you can get many different viewpoints. So I think it is a good place to share controversial opinions. I just think people need to be self-aware of if what they think is going to hurt other people's feelings.
Perfect. So I'm going to reply to that and say I also agree that this is the best place to share your opinion, because I feel like on social media, on Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and I could list them on and on. This is where you post your life. This is where you post your good times, your bad times. You share your lives. You open it up with people and your followers. And also you should insert that this is where you feel the most comfortable to comment about current affairs and current issues. So if you can't be yourself online and share your opinion online, where can you share your opinion? Where else? And also, if you that distance, like you said, so you can comment on certain things in the like from home and post it to anyone and everyone. That distance kind of is a confidence builder. Like you don't have to say it to anyone's face. Like you don't have to comment on, I don't know, Donald Trump and what happened in the Capitol building in face to face with a group of people. You can just say that, and be the your most confident self behind that screen.
Yeah, social media itself is such like a fast-paced thing with different trends. There's like millions and millions of posts every single day on each individual platform, that even though a situation might seem big or like a discussion or something like that, people will be on to the next thing within a matter of hours. That's how it moves. So I think being able to do that, not hanging on to things, like just discussing and move past it, it's a lot different to face, like seeing someone constantly and stuff like that. Everyone just moves past it. So yeah.
I think
Kate. Yeah.
Okay, so I think with social media, it's more or less like the land of whatever's in your mind. So if it's in your mind, it's going to go out there. That's just what I find with social media. However, although it has its positive benefits, it's also got a lot of negative benefits. So for example, one, it brings major addiction. Like with some influencers, especially, once you've got that lead, once you're at the top, once you've got that game, once you've got to where you want to be, and that's your ultimate goal of social media, if you want to be a top like YouTuber or influencer on Instagram or Twitter, you name it, that's what you want to be, sometimes your head can get a little stuck in the ground, and that's not always good, because at the same time you have to remember where you used to be, you know, and not everything you say is going to be nice. Like I could write something in lowercase, and for example, Leanne can take it in a nice way, you know, and then let's say that same thing that I've written in lowercase, Jess is going to probably take it in a total opposite way, you know. And a lot of people, I find, they perceive things differently, and at the end of the day, just like you all said, it's all to do with what people say and how you look at them. You know, not everything is going to be bad, not everything is going to be seen as good, but at the end of the day, if more cautious and guidelines were there to be put in place, we wouldn't have this whole issue going on, and that wouldn't like stop us from having such things like freedom of speech. But just I want to say like a few negatives for social media. So the first one, obviously, I said was it can be addictive. Other than that, with young people in society, it can also reduce them from being social, and that's just not social online, but it's just social physically. Like when you go, I don't know, to McDonald's, for example, everyone's on their phone. No one says hi to you. Like, it's like we're not in a happy place no more. And it's like, okay, social media is here and this is my life. It's my life and social media. And little stuff like that, they literally take away simple stuff like manners. And from that obviously impacts your communication, which brings communication barriers. So, Dipesh, do you have anything to say along those lines?
Not really. I'd add that without social media, you're kind of just in your own community, and you don't really get to see what the outside is like, or what outside your community is thinking, and so you can kind of like change views and kind of see what other people think and what their opinion is. And so social media is quite important in that.
It kind of just gives you that confidence boost to say whatever you feel that you wouldn't say to someone to their face. I know it sounds like, you know, you're being two different types of people, but if I don't feel comfortable in a group setting to say, I don't know, my opinion about a specific thing, I would take it online. So that's it just gives you that distance from people, which allows you to just, you know, bring up your confidence levels. That's what I think. We're going to move on to the next question, which is Jess. Do you want to take that away?
Yeah, so the question I got was, why do you think that there's been so much protesting in the last 12 months? So from what I understood, I said that I feel like protests have had like a historical background. Like there's been protests since the start of time, like, and these often occur due to like social injustices, or like where people feel ignored, or where people feel like they haven't got support from the government. So like from examples I got of protests throughout history, it was kind of bound with like the French Revolution in 1778, which fought for the universal rights of the French. And also you can look at the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King and Black African Americans, which fought for their rights in the 1960s. So from these examples, you can kind of see that there's a background and reasoning for protests. And in general, I feel like protests are a large part of our society as a whole, and that's because of, obviously, we live in a democracy. So it's like we feel entitled and we feel strong enough to go against the grain, and if something upsets us, we can go forth to argue our point and take to the streets, as we've seen. So examples of these could be during the pandemic, even Black Lives Matter movement, where like nations were coming together to fight for Black African Americans. In addition to this, we have the whole thing with the Asian Americans and the anti-Asian hate movement going on, which has happened because of like things of coronavirus, so racial tendencies there. So I feel like protests have been a large part of our lives for centuries. And I feel like people have begun protesting a lot more during this last year because they feel like they can identify with issues in society and they feel ready to go out and speak about them because they have the right to, because we live in a democracy. So I feel like that's why there's been so much protesting.
I feel like within the last 12 months, the impact of COVID and how COVID has changed our lives has changed how we view injustice and our tolerance levels to injustice. So obviously with the pandemic, and you know, every day people are dying and we've lost so many family members and, you know, key people, and you just hear death and more death, and, you know, lockdown after lockdown. The world is just a completely different climate. You know, economies are crashing, and with that all going on in the background, it just makes you think, like, time is of the essence. Like, who knows, I might not be here next month. You know, there's a deadly there's a disease going on around that's killing everyone. So it makes you see things. That's why I feel like George Floyd, I think lockdown started in March, and you know, March, April, May, things were really, like, you know, it was really looking scary, especially in the beginning. And when George Floyd lit that spark in June, people just like could not be silent. You could not be silent about that topic. And social media played such a major role online. I feel like social media and protesting comes hand in hand, because one, everything starts online. That's where you get your information, you know, updates all the time. People are posting, news outlets, your friends are commenting about current affairs. Social media is where you get your information. That's me personally, and majority of people. So I feel like social media is where the grassroots of most of these protests begin, because that's where you find out, that's where you know, hear everyone's opinion, and then all the protests become organized on social media. That's how it happened, you know, with the Leicester one as well, especially like the one that happened at Clock Tower in June. All the protesting, most people got their information online. They started assembling online, and then they took to the streets, like and took it into a physical space. So they both really come hand in hand. And also, if you guys remember, I think it was 2012 with the London riots. They all started on BBM. That's how people literally assembled, city to city. They were like, we're going to Birmingham tonight, you know, Newcastle the next day. And the government actually, you know, contacted BlackBerry and the owners of BBM. And they told them, shut down BBM, because this is how the protesters are assembling in the streets. So it plays such a massive role, because social media, like I said, this is where you get your info. This is where every day you're checking, multiple times a day, you're checking what's trending, who's saying what. And then if you have enough fuel to the fire, this is when you take that into a physical space and you go out to the streets. And for example, you can see what's happening now with the vigils. You know, there's people that, even though in a national lockdown, the police are trying to restrict the amount of people going to, you know, the Sarah Everard, the vigils, but people are, you know, masked up. They're ready. They're ready to go and take to the streets, regardless of the current context that we're living in. So in the past 12 months, I feel like people have zero tolerance, or a much lower tolerance than they did before, to any injustice because of what's happening with COVID. What do you guys think about that?
I think like, oh, sorry, Tia.
No, go on, it's fine.
I think through like our history in general, it's always been a lot of young people have seen injustice and wanted to speak on it. And I think now, because social media is so popular, it is kind of a young people's platform. They're kind of grouping together and being like, I don't like this. And then someone sees it like, do you know what? I don't like that either. And then it kind of spreads like wildfire. Young people just, I think, especially as we're getting a lot more involved in politics and government, and like we're becoming educated on it, like we're understanding regulations, we're understanding rules, like we're learning the same kind of game that people and politicians play. So we're becoming more powerful. And I think because people are coming with that education and knowledge, people higher up have no choice but to listen. They have to listen, because we are coming with facts, and people are coming with, as Hannah said, that there was actually a fuel to fire. People don't want to sit down and take it. So I think young people are really pushing out for change and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, so I've just realised you guys covered what I was going to say. So thank you so much for summarising it, Leanne. So we'll now...
Dipesh, do you have any comments about why people's, like, in the past 12 months specifically, why have they been protesting so much?
I think you guys really covered what I said, but I think with COVID and stuff, like that stuff kind of like stays in your head, and so you kind of feel like, okay, before COVID becomes really bad, I should really say this, and hopefully we can change people's opinions about things.
Yeah,
so that could be a reason why.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question. Who's up next? Is it Jess? Let me just check. Sorry.
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah, take it away.
Okay, so another question I had was, do you feel like we need fact checking on social media? So as I think of it anyways, I feel like social media is a place where it's really influential in spreading awareness, providing education, and like allowing us to have fast communication between each other, which can be seen as like a large positive and an asset to our society. However, it can be increasingly easy to like spread false narratives and harmful information across social media, and often people that do that never actually take responsibility for starting that. So false information can be spread through Twitter, Instagram, and all these things, and reach a worldwide audience. And I feel like that can cause so many things like depression, anxiety, and most of the time it can even cause things like global panic. And that can be seen through Donald Trump's example of tweeting about the Chinese virus, which can be easily linked to the anti-Asian crimes that are happening currently in the USA now. So, and you need to understand that like, with saying things, and if we don't have fact checking, things can literally, it can basically turn our world upside down if we don't have solid facts, solid data. So I feel like with fact checking, we're able to like reduce the amount of social anxiety we have, and we're able to look at what we have, because in education, we all learn like science, maths, and all things. We need to have facts before we make statements. So it feels like if that's not emulated through social media, then it's going to turn to anarchy, basically. So I feel like fact checking is very important.
I agree with that, because I find that with social media, you naturally just form yourself into a bubble. So if you like a particular person and you know a bit about them, you follow them, they're trending, you're going to naturally like put yourself into, not a trap, but you're literally going to naturally find yourself following exactly what they're going to do, and kind of have a lot of self-belief that what they're saying and doing is correct. But then you don't want to like get caught up in the wrong crowd. So it's also very important to know exactly whatever goes out, is it right, is it wrong? Like this is 100% why like fact checking needs to be done and said. And that's not even for like us, I think that's just for everyone, politicians, like journalists, you name it, everyone, no matter what you put out there, it needs to be checked, because a lot of people just tend to put out opinions rather than general facts to make statements.
Yeah, I think it's really important, but I think it really needs to be what's the word? Sorry, it's gone out of my head. It needs to be monitored, basically, because I think it's really important, especially when people of power have the ability to just tweet, like we saw with Donald Trump, and just tweet out information to millions of people. But there was also a lot of issues with some of the actual fact-checking companies. I think it was on Facebook that they had ties to like KKK communities and anti-Black organizations and stuff like that, and Facebook got called out on it because they said, how are you working with a fact-checking organization that has ties to this kind of racist community, really? And then it kind of allowed them to push out stories that were kind of racist and were kind of discriminating, but because they were approved by the fact-checking organizations, the independent ones, people were just going ahead with these stories. So I feel like fact checking is so important nowadays, especially that social media is so powerful, but it really needs to be monitored by the right people that are non-biased and don't have ties to any kind of community. They're just there to fact check.
I'm just gonna throw my opinion out there and say that me personally, I don't think that social media or a social media platform is the place to fact check, because I feel like this is where people are their most natural selves, they're most comfortable, and like the average person doesn't really have, they might hear something and get their information from a source, but they might not necessarily have it down word to word, or have a specific reference for what they say. So it's more like hearsay, or it's like Chinese whispers sometimes, that you hear something, but I understand the implications that it can have. But in terms of enforcing this and bringing this in, for example, if you could, I don't think that, like, in realistic terms, I don't know how you would do that. Do you guys, like, how would you actually enforce that? How would you police the false information versus the true information. And also, sorry, before you answer that question, for example, like there are verified accounts on Twitter and Instagram that specifically, put out fact-checked information, like, news anchors, physical accounts, like they are the ones you go to for the fact checkers. But it already internally with themselves, I think there have been many cases where like NBC, CBS, these American news stations, they have their own problems fact checking. So it's like you can't trust anyone online, like unless you go separately and doing Google search on what's happening, I don't know what's happening in India with the farmers. Like you have to go and do your own research, because social media is a facade. Everyone is just saying what they feel, someone saying what someone else said. It's hard. How are you supposed to figure out what the actual real information is and what is exaggerated or misinterpreted or misconstrued, and then you're passing that information on? So it's like such a complicated web. So how would you actually enforce a fact checking, or how would you police it?
Going off what Leanne said about Facebook and things like that, I feel like it's the role of like the government as the main bodies of our society to like enforce this, because they like, now we all know the power of social media, and I feel like with Twitter and Instagram, they do have the facilities to enforce this fact checking. They have the money, they have the resources, so it's not something that's like completely impossible. They can do it, and they can hire people have degrees in research. So I feel like it's easy to enforce it. It's restrictions on people's freedom, as we spoke about before. So it's as you said, it's a tangle. It's basically yeah, it's hard.
It's tangled web.
Yeah.
Dipesh, do you have any thoughts on like fact checking and social media?
I think with especially with Twitter as a social media platform, it does need some sort of fact checking, because you do have certain journalists, like people that work for the BBC, who do say accurate things. Then you've got other journalists which work for like print media, so like Telegraph or the Guardian, and they could be saying some quite biased things, and I think people could believe it, and so it tends to kind of make them form an opinion which may not be true. So if fact checking was like a thing in social media, I think Twitter would need it.
Definitely. And you always hear about Donald Trump and fake news. That's just like ringing in my head right now. But Leanne, you said something interesting yesterday, I think, about Donald Trump and what he said about like COVID and bleach. Do you remember?
Yeah. He basically, I think it was like a news preference. He was a news press thing he was doing, and he basically spoke to the doctor, the kind of like how we have a health secretary, it was the American version, and he said, couldn't we kind of inject with some kind of disinfectant or something like that, like bleach type stuff. And some people that are like loyal supporters of his, they actually researched that. I'm pretty sure one or two people might have tried it, but I'm not 100% sure. But he basically put that out, and a lot of people were considering it. And then some of them were kind of mad that like doctors hadn't suggested that. They were like, well, Donald Trump said this. He said we can use disinfectant. And it was so awkward, because obviously we have common sense. We know that that's not something you should do. You learn that kind of stuff in primary school. But when someone in a position of power comes forward and says these kinds of things, you automatically have some kind of almost trust towards them, because you think you're in this position, so we have to kind of trust you. But if we look back in history and we look at all the things that prime ministers have done, presidents, like rulers everywhere, none of them are perfect, and none of them have been perfect. None of them are going to be perfect. Like, they're humans at the end of the day, they make mistakes. But I just think like that's why social media is very, very dangerous when
I think
it gets into the wrong hands.
I think we got to separate like the people with power, like the influencers and the the MPs and the decision makers and them sorts of people, versus like the average Joe, because the average Joe is not going to know, check your reference and double check triple check what you're saying is correct. But the people, in terms of like the people with power on a social media platform, that's when you get into dangerous territory. And because you obviously have, you know, millions of people or an X amount of people following your every word, you know. And for example, like Donald Trump, he actually, with his words, he caused, you know, the insurgents on the Capitol. You know, he told them, you know, take the streets and you know, show your dominance to his own supporters, and what that caused and the repercussions of that were like monumental. So you have to be careful. Fact checking is important, but I feel like in realistic terms, I don't know how that will work, because who can you trust, basically? And I don't. And then you get into that tangle web of, you know, who can you actually trust? So that's my opinion. So we're going to go into the last question. And Leanne, is that your question?
Yeah, it is.
So
so should we have limits of to freedom of speech on social media? I said that I believe that freedom of speech should never be denied, but it's personal understanding and education that allows us to distinguish what could be harmful to others. So for example, Hannah, how you were saying that you might go and rant about something on Twitter that you might not talk about with your friends, you have that kind of understanding that you think, okay, I'm not gonna hurt someone's feelings. You know that your words carry weight, so you're not gonna go onto Twitter and say all nasty things or give these opinions that could hurt other people's feelings. But there's other people that don't have that same self-awareness, so they'll go on social media and they'll say these opinions and say these things that are gonna hurt other people, or they're gonna incite kind of hatred around the online community. So I feel like perception is the key way to tell if something's an insult or if it's opinion. Limiting freedom of speech on social media will come down to how moderators and censors perceive the comment, which then repeats the cycle we've been talking about the whole time about, like, well, how can you limit someone's freedom judged on someone else's perception of what they've said? You can't really do it. But there's been some universities that have been campaigning to ban controversial speakers on their sites, and some student unions are working towards trying to get social media platforms to have more censorship on the websites and stuff. But I feel like freedom of speech shouldn't be limited on social media. It just needs to be monitored, because as we've learned from like people in power and normal people as well, their words can incite hatred for others, and their words can hurt other people's feelings and cause more problems than benefits.
I'm just gonna say that and reply to your question by saying, if we limit people on social media and their opinions, bear in mind, keeping in context of, you know, controversial opinions get cancelled, people get suspended, people's reports get tweets and posts can get reported. Do you feel like we run the risk of or eventually having the same opinion? Like, there will be no different. We will all be, you know, in this happy unicorn, you know, rainbows and clouds. We will all just have, you know, positive and nice things to say all the time, because all the negative people have been exiled.
No, I think, like, if we're being realistic, the world's never going to be like that, because every person is so different. Literally everyone has a different opinion. Whether you agree on the same things, your opinion might slightly differ. So I feel like there's not going to be a world where everyone agrees on the same thing, because it's just not going to happen. People are going to want to go against the grain, because some people are like that. Some people want to be different to other people. They want to share different opinions. So I feel like censorship is like a very sensitive thing, and you can go over the line again of eliminating freedom of speech. But I feel like people just need to be able to judge whether what they're saying is inciting hate, or whether it's just a general opinion that people might disagree on. I mean, it's like, for politically in the UK, someone that supports Labour might have a problem with someone that supports Conservatives because they feel like their values don't match. But that doesn't necessarily incite hate, it's just a difference of opinion. But when you get into topics of things like people saying all lives matter, or how can you say Black Lives Matter, because isn't that getting rid of all the other races, things like that, those types of things come from miseducation and people not understanding the movement. And then that is what incites hate and negativity and so forth. So yeah.
I think in reality with social media and speech, we have to expect the unexpected. Like, no matter what you say or what you do, nothing's going to go right, nothing. And most of the time things are going to go wrong. You know, regardless of what you say. I can tell someone the sky right now is blue and tomorrow it's going to rain with thunder and storm and lightning. You're going to have someone tell me something different, because on their weather it tells you it's going to be sunny all day with light showers, and because I've mentioned the words thunder and lightning, they're going to literally be like, no, it's not thunder and lightning, it's going to be light showers. And what am I going to do? I have to be prepared to expect the unexpected from other people. I'm just going to have to be like, listen, do you know what, I think it's going to be like this, but that's your opinion, I respect that, but let's see what happens tomorrow, you know. And that's how sometimes we've got to think when it comes to social media. However, speaking with its limits, Twitter does have its limits, because it's got like I don't know how many characters you can type, but I know it's got a limit on it compared to like Instagram and Facebook. However, if the other two, so like Facebook and Twitter, no, Facebook and Instagram have those limits as well, I think things may be a little bit different. But Twitter, I would say, would be the most used platform to express your opinions on certain things that happen in the world, because it's like another forum of news, basically.
Jess?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, basically what you guys have said, but in terms of like, I don't think that like social like freedom of speech should be limited, but I feel like people should definitely, there should be like a movement or like a program where people are able to articulate their opinions in a positive way, or like respectfully, like address people in terms of instead of like being aggressive or coming off a bit like rude. I feel like there should be like a type of program where it helps people to be able to debate like how we are now. It's like civil and it's respectful, and I feel like a lot of people don't have that kind of training. And I feel like with social media, there's a whole cancel culture. You say anything and it's done. But I feel like if people are able to articulate themselves respectfully, it will definitely lessen that aggro kind of thing. So I feel like that is something that,
I mean, we're not like, we as a user on Twitter or Instagram, whatever, it's not our job to police people. I feel like just because you can be so outspoken, that's why people are like, okay, they're done, they're cancelled, because we have the power to do that. But in hindsight, there is a lot of features on Twitter. For example, you can mute someone, you can block them, you can report them. But if you don't want to see what they're posting, you know, you don't necessarily have to say, that's it, I want their account gone, I want them deleted off the face of the earth. Like, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can mute them if you don't agree with them. You can block them so you don't have to see their profile at all. So I feel like in that respect, their freedom of speech isn't being denied. You don't necessarily have to see it. But I just feel like people, as Jess said, it comes down to training, it comes down to education, it comes down to self-awareness. People need to know within themselves whether their thoughts and their feelings, if that's how they feel, is going to hurt others. Maybe just don't put it online to people that you don't know who are going to read it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought I was muted. How do you guys think we can navigate freedom of speech and social media better? I just want to in terms of like moving forward.
I think definitely training from a young age. Like, we all got taught, don't speak to strangers online, don't do all these things, and then you grow up and you think, oh, let me just make a Twitter account and start talking a lot. And I just feel like if we keep that social media education throughout even into university, if we keep that momentum going rather than just saying don't talk to strangers when you're like 15, it will have more of an impact, and people will be able to, as I said, articulate and express their opinions better. That's what I think.
Yeah,
I feel like sometimes we have to try and put ourselves in other people's shoes, especially when they receive a comment or they read something, and sometimes I might not find something nice, but I have to think, okay, it's not about me, it's not what I think, it's just that's just that person, that's just how they are, and sometimes you just got to go with it. So I think trying to think outside of the box rather than being not selfish, but just thinking it as if you're the point of the reason to why they're saying it, that sometimes is important, because you won't then get the wrong message if that person is saying something that's correct.
Dipesh, do you have any anything to contribute about how to navigate freedom of speech and social media better?
I think as you go on with social media, you kind of have to be a bit more careful about what you say and about the words you use, because there's a perfectly nice way of saying I don't agree with your opinion. Another way you could go about this is doing this, rather than saying direct insults to people, which could really affect them in a negative way. So I think there should be a bit more sensitivity and a bit more maturity in how people behave online.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah, so thanks everyone for sharing their opinions today. I think it's been quite an insightful discussion, and we all understand our position and our roles and our responsibilities on social media a little better now than we did before. I would also sorry, I was unmuted again. Thank you, Dipesh, for coming out and supporting our panel and sharing your views. Yeah, you provided a lot of insightful information. Thank you, Tia. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, Jess. Thanks to the organisers for putting this on for us and allowing us to express our freedom of speech about what we think of freedom of speech. And yeah. I think that is the end of our segment. And also thank you to DMU for allowing us to put this on for people of YouTube and people out there, and providing us with the platform for Freedom Day. We are thankful. Yeah, no, I think that is the end of our segment. So if you guys feel free to leave. And also the next segment is Sue Hunter, and that is the main event for the Freedom Day. So stay tuned and keep watching along at home. And also there will be performances later, and performers doing poetry and singers, and there'll be different societies taking part. So keep watching.